Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today for our presentation of So What? Using themes to improve all aspects of the visitor experience. My name is Jen Dick, and I am joining today from Brantford, Ontario in Canada, which is the home of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat peoples. And I manage interpretation for Royal Botanical Gardens, 2,700 acres of cultivated gardens and nature sanctuaries, including programs, tours, exhibits, signage, training. And I'm also the secretary for Interpretation Canada and a trainer with the National Association for Interpretation.
I'm Chuck Lennox with Lennox Insites, a consulting firm based in Seattle, Washington, the home of the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish people. I focus on interpretation, interpretive planning, program evaluation, and informal education.
And I'm Pam Murray. I work at Milner Gardens and Woodland, also in Canada on Vancouver Island in the traditional unceded territory of the Qualicum First Nation. I am also the national chairperson for Interpretation Canada. And today's session, as Jen said, is focusing on how to use themes and specifically interpretive themes across all areas to improve visitor experience. So beyond just the traditional interpretation and education areas. So first, we're going to define what we actually mean when we say theme in this presentation, because it means something very specific in interpretation that might be slightly different than how it's understood in other contexts. Jen is going to go in depth with a case study from Royal Botanical Gardens, sorry, showing what integrating an interpretive theme across all areas could actually look like. Chuck and Jen and I will provide a few other smaller examples of this, and then we're going to go in briefly to what the theme writing process actually looks like. So, what is a theme? Now, you might hear the word theme and think like children's birthday party. Like if you're doing a dinosaur themed event or a bee themed party, you're going to put dinosaurs or bees on everything, and that's the theme. That is one use of the word, but that's not the kind of theme that we're talking about. We're talking specifically about an interpretive theme. So to best explain this, I'm going to turn to Sam Ham from the University of Idaho, because he's kind of a thought leader when it comes to what we call thematic interpretation. Sam says, and I'm reading a quote from him here, "We understand that visitors are going to forget most of all the colorful facts presented to them. But we know that if the conclusion they draw from those facts is meaningful and important, it will provoke them to thought, and they'll continue to think about that conclusion even when the facts that supported it are long gone from memory. A theme is a take-home message. It's the moral of the story or the main conclusion that a visitor takes away." So, for instance, you might forget all of the particular facts and messages and examples that Chuck and Jen and I present today, but hopefully you'll continue to think about our take-home message, which is that interpretive themes are a thing and that they can help improve all aspects of visitor experience at your garden or other site. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about themes in interpretation. It's the so what of things. And Chuck is going to talk a little bit about what themes are not.
So what isn't a theme? Pam mentioned that aspect of one word thrown out, and that's my theme. When you turn to interpretation, people will sometimes think, well, in this case, an interpretive exhibit on ribbon snakes, what's the theme? Ribbon snakes. Well, no, it's a topic, one word. A theme would be a full sentence. So in this case, if you were to look at this, if a visitor was to look at this exhibit, they hopefully would come away with something close to this kind of a sentence. Conserving biodiversity is essential to a healthy wetland. So it's kind of the story, the summary of what you're talking about, not just the one word, but a full and complete sentence that way. So we're going to move on to kind of a chart, a matrix here that's published by the National Association for Interpretation for their certified interpretive guide book, the textbook for the course itself. And you can see on the left-hand side a series of words. I won't say which ones are sentences or which are themes or topics. And then a way to kind of filter through. First column, is it a theme or topic? The gray areas are, is it a complete sentence, connect to a tangible and intangible? Does it provoke thinking? Does it answer so what? If we were to look at the first one on the top there, bald eagles are the symbol of our nation. Is it a theme or a topic? Well, let's see. It's a complete sentence. And tangibles and intangibles are some other concepts that will connect, that are connected to this development of a theme that we won't touch too much on today. But does it provoke thinking? Well, a little bit. Bald eagles, what do you mean by bald eagles are the symbol of our country? And does it answer the question, so what? Probably not as well as it could, but it's attempting to do that. We'll try the second one below that, endangered Hawaiian plants. It's not a complete sentence. We don't really know much about it. It's just that endangered Hawaiian plants. So this one is a topic. So those differences, especially real way to tell is a complete sentence as the very first criteria. And if you were to go down this list, you could probably figure out which ones are the complete sentences or not. We used to have this chart with periods at the end and people could choose those really quickly. But it's a different process now as we go to try to figure out the differences between themes and topics. And I'll turn it over to Jen.
So I'd like to give you an example of using an interpretive theme for a broad cross-departmental project. In 2018 at Royal Botanical Gardens, we began planning for multiple years of annual themes. And I will note that after the first year, we decided it was a better investment to work on a biannual cycle with the effort to produce content and collateral. So instead of doing a new theme every year, we would do a new theme every 2 years. And that worked out really well for us this year in 2020, of course. So to start the process, we formed a committee with staff across many different departments in the organization, including visitor experience, marketing and communication, education, special events, customer programs, horticulture, science, our development department, our gift shop, and even membership was a part of this team. And the big question is, why did we want to do this? Well, using an interpretive theme to create an experience for our visitors was hopefully going to be a cost-effective way to reinvent the way that our visitors and our guests were coming and experiencing the gardens. We were hoping to encourage repeat visitation, and we wanted to create a refreshed and managed visit for our guests. So the goal was to provide an overarching context each year that would help us to develop programs, events, package things together, and our big goal, provide legendary guest experiences, which is part of our previous strategic plan that just wrapped up. So our committee brainstormed broad topics that would connect different offerings from across the gardens, and we came up with a plan. So in 2019 and 2020, we've been exploring Come to Your Senses. Now, I want to break this down a little bit because Come to Your Senses, it is a sentence, but it's not our theme. It is the title of our theme. So our topic is exploring gardens with our senses, and our full interpretive theme statement is the one that you see on the screen here. So it's a little bit long, but I'll read it out. The world of plants delights our senses, offering us everything from the spectacular color and fragrance of flowers to the soothing sounds of foliage rustling in the breeze, a world full of engaging textures, and a pantry filled with exotic herbs and spices to tickle our palates and soothe our spirits. So this is a pretty long interpretive theme statement. Many really effective themes are quite short. For example, my department's guiding theme statement is only 4 words: all life needs plants. But in this case, we were crafting a theme that would guide the majority of our visitor engagement offerings for the year. And so we wanted to be very specific, but also holistic. Next, I want to show you a few examples of how we incorporated that theme into the experiences. I worked really closely with our horticulture department to plan our displays of annuals. And these annuals were really, the displays were to help encourage visitors to explore the gardens with their senses. The displays were spread out over 3 of our different garden areas, and each display connected to a different sense, including ones that you might not think about, like temperature. The signage that accompanied the displays and a visitor handout provided a self-guided tour option to explore all of the different displays. We also offered short daily interpretive tours in the garden to guide people through some of these displays. We were able to connect some of our existing visitor offerings to the annual theme, so we weren't completely reinventing ourselves. So the package of existing things, packaging existing things in new ways for visitors. And this approach was used in our marketing materials, our membership information, and on our website. Some events like our tea festival in November and our summer music series, which is Red Hot Jazz and Cool Blues, were a natural fit to tie into Come to Your Senses. We also had programs like cooking classes and drumming, and those tied in really, really well. So we didn't have to create all new things to use this theme. It was just a way of packaging things. We also offer daily summer discovery carts, all connected to the senses somehow. Some of our existing cart topics, like this rose cart, worked really well, but we also created new content about plant wellness, for example, where we explored forest bathing and aromatherapy. So we were tying in senses in new and different ways. Now, I don't have revenue and sales information, but I can share that my department's interpretive engagements with discovery carts, tours, roving engagements went up 14% in our core summer programming months for 2019 as opposed to 2018. We had hoped for another increase this year in 2020, but COVID happened, so we did not meet that target. So Come to Your Senses is an example of using a theme across multiple departments in an organization, but we'd also like to give you some examples from very specific areas where interpretive themes can be used, but on a smaller scale.
So in this retail setting at the Alcatraz prison, which is part of Golden Gate National Recreation Area in the Bay Area in San Francisco, is a great example of the use of interpretive features, interpretive themes in selling retail that relates to the visit that people have had. So you'll notice here some photographs as well as some labels and signage that connects with those items that are being sold, those items that are connected to the stories that are there. The retail operations also have done a lot of surveys with customers, focus groups, figuring out what interests you, what part of the story do you want to know more about, what are some objects that you'd be interested in. Ironically, if you look to the far right there, there's a set of keys, and you think, why would they sell keys? What are they keys to? Well, visitors had this sense that, you know, from the movies, the Hollywood movies that you've seen, the different aspects of the allure of Alcatraz, if you want to call it that, were the clanking of keys and guards and the like. And so what they've done with these is to sell these keys, but then also have a story that goes with it. The objects also have hang tags. And they really bring you into it's not just sales, but it's telling a story of objects that people want to take with them as a result of the visits that they make. I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Chuck. So this is an example of interpretive themes and some other interpretive principles being used in fundraising. This is an example from a provincial park on Vancouver Island where I used to work, and specifically from the Goldstream Nature House. So the Goldstream Nature House is in a provincial park, but the government stopped funding it in the early 2000s. And ever since then, the interpreters and educators have had to fundraise to be able to stay open. Their busiest time of year is the fall, which it is right now, when the chum salmon return to the park and local school classes come to learn about them. There are tens of thousands of salmon that show up and literally thousands of visitors. A busy day in the nature house in the middle of November can be 2,000 to 3,000 people through in a day. And with that many people on site, it's really important to not just engage people in, you know, knowing more about the salmon, but actually helping them understand how their impacts on the park affect salmon habitat. But without funding, none of this is possible. And so the interpreters had to raise money to keep the nature house open and keep their school programs going. So they started this Goldstream Chums program where local businesses could sponsor, their interpreters, they like their puns, a class, but they also tried some other things. And the one that really had the most connection to an interpretive theme was something called the Salmon Run. So this was a 5K fundraising run that started in 2003 as a fundraiser specifically for those school programs. Now, the marketing tagline that was used was "Salmon Run, so should you." So a marketing tagline isn't necessarily an interpretive theme, but this particular tagline is an example because it's very much informed by the themes of the Salmon Run programming, which are very much about the interdependence of salmon, the forest, and the importance of park visitors taking care of the place when they're visiting. So that message of stewardship of the park that is part of the education and interpretation programs is also in this fundraising event. The run was really effective in engaging an audience that isn't normally engaged in the Salmon Run, the local running community, and the things that are happening at Goldstream, as well as being a pretty effective fundraiser, at least for the first few years until everybody and their uncle started running fundraiser runs. It still runs today, but it's more of a community engagement event now than a fundraiser. And Jen has one about rules signs, I think.
Mm-hmm. So I really like this example from Alaska State Parks, and they were having issues with feeding wildlife and the impacts of that. So they undertook a whole campaign. Part of that was signage, and I really like this particular sign to showcase why you shouldn't do something. So enforcing rules, but really explaining why you shouldn't. And this is something called the authority of the resource approach. And that has shown to be really, really effective. So in this particular case, instead of just saying, please don't feed the birds, the interpretive theme is, your kindness is killing me. And that's really impactful because if you actually care about the birds, then knowing why you shouldn't feed them is really important. The campaign resulted, the whole campaign, not just the signs, but it resulted in a dramatic 99.88% drop in fecal coliform between 2014 and 2018. So it was a pretty effective approach to enforcing rules. This example is from membership. Now, I'm not entirely sure if the Museum of Modern Art used an interpretive theme here, but membership campaigns can make really valuable use of interpretive themes. And a key element of a great interpretive theme is the use of a universal concept, which anyone can identify and connect with. And here, the Museum of Modern Art is making really good use of the universal concept of belonging in order to engage new and existing members. I think it's worth noting here that membership sits in different places in the organization structure of different organizations. And so that can lead to different goals and objectives for what the program is trying to achieve. So at RBG, our membership department is part of, development department, but I've also seen it in visitor experience departments. I've seen it with outside groups such as cooperating societies or friends organizations. So depending where membership is within the organization, you might employ a totally different interpretive theme in order to guide some of your messaging.
With interpretive planning, we use themes to focus what the story will be, to help visitors understand what are occurring there, and to organize different things. In this case, if you look at the very bottom of this screen, in the city of Austin, Texas, at Peace Park, they worked with Peace Park Conservancy to develop an interpretive plan. And one of the challenges is some very horrific history that needs to be told at this site. This park originally was the ranch and home of a former Texas governor who owned enslaved people. And this story needs to be told. So you can see at the bottom, they've developed a theme that will help tell that story so that this history isn't forgotten and that visitors will understand something that occurred there before they are enjoying it today. Another example, whether you like Starbucks or not, is in the retail or commercial space. Retail world uses themes a lot to tell a story of what products that they have, what products they want to sell, and the story behind those products. In this case, this is a new model that Starbucks Coffee Company has started to do around the world called the Starbucks Roastery. And it simulates a roasting plant. You go in and you can actually smell coffee being roasted. And you can see here where our coffee beans are being moved around the store of the roasting plant, the roastery. And it's a truly customer experience like like you're inside of a roasting plant. And everything is looked at from the furnishings to the materials and the like to fit into the overall theme of the location. I'll pass it on to Pam.
Thanks, Jack. So this is an example from the world of marketing. So I mentioned before the difference between just putting bees on everything and calling that a bee theme versus an interpretive theme about bees. And if you look at the sign on the right, it's a sign with a shark fin on it. It's for an exhibit called The Secret World of Sharks and Rays, and there's a shark fin on it. So it appears to just kind of be, this is cute. They're marketing an exhibit about sharks and rays, so they put a shark fin on the sign. But I use this example because there's a deeper thing going on here where the marketing company, and I don't know if they actually worked with the education and interpretation department at the Vancouver Aquarium for this or not, but they seem to have a handle on this so what idea. And by positioning this marketing sign in the intertidal zone, as you drive into Stanley Park, where the aquarium is located, they've set it up so that when the tide comes up, there's just this shark fin sticking out of the water. That's definitely provocative, and it's definitely going to make passersby ask some questions because there appears to be a shark there, right? It's going to provoke thought. People passing by are going to ask themselves if this could be a real shark, and that's going to communicate a deeper idea, which is that downtown Vancouver is, or at least is connected to by water, shark habitat, which is very much one of those big so what themes when it comes to what residents of downtown Vancouver maybe need to know in order to understand shark conservation and the aquarium's work. So again, I don't know if this was actually come to by an interpretive theme process, but it's definitely illustrating how an interpretive theme can be used in marketing. Now the question is, how do you come up with these themes? And Jen is going to talk to us about that.
And now that we've had a chance to look at some of those examples, the process to creating a theme has a few steps to it. And it's a fairly straightforward process, but not necessarily an easy one. So before we even start though, I wanna share 3 very important questions that you need to ask before you start writing a theme. The first is, who is your audience? The second is, why are you doing it? What's the point? And the third is, what is your topic? And in this case, your topic should be very specific. So in the example shown here in this theme exercise that I did several years ago, we started with the very vague topic of winter and drilled down to a very specific topic of Canadian winter traditions. And from that specific topic, we started working with what our interpretive theme could be. Now, this is a handy fill in the blank form that can use the answers to those questions in order to help you come up with what your theme statement could be. So when it comes to your topic, in order for your audience to achieve your goal, it's really, really important for them to understand blank. And that blank is your theme statement. It's a complete idea that really gets to the so what. Because so what? Why should your audience care about what it is that you're talking about? So at the very beginning of the presentation, Pam shared that the theme is the main conclusion that our visitor takes away. It really needs to answer this so what question. Why does it matter to them? Otherwise, they're not going to remember it. So here we have a specific example of an interpretive theme that Pam developed for a campground theater program in Banff National Park. And it's about wolverines. And there's a lot that Pam can say about wolverines. so much that she asked me to present this part so that it doesn't turn into a Wolverine program. And if you ever have the opportunity, though, I should say that I encourage you to share a cup of coffee with Pam and chat about Wolverines. Now, in this case, the topic of the program was Wolverines. The audience were people who were staying at the campground at Lake Louise, which is a very diverse group of people, but they all have the same experience of having spent time physically in the Lake Louise area. So that's what they have in common as an audience. The goal on Parks Canada part was for park visitors to understand why they were encountering traffic delays as large sections of the Trans-Canada Highway that goes through the park were being renovated in order to add wildlife crossings that would benefit wolverines and other subalpine animals. And it would also support the associated research needed to make these crossings effective. So having a focused theme and one that was compelling enough to help people feel okay being stuck in traffic on their way to their hiking destination, and having them be motivated to help out with some citizen science by reporting any sightings was really critical. So the theme that they used was Wolverines are inspiring heroes who face obstacles to survival. This hero theme was targeted to appeal to the type of people camping in Lake Louise. These folks who are drawn to big mountain landscapes and the adventures that are available there. It was also important that people understood wolverines are really vulnerable and that this is why the research and the wildlife crossings were necessary. And so the theme focused on real, vulnerable human heroes rather than the more obvious comic book style hero. The theme, once it was developed, allowed the program to have a clear focus that would appeal to the audience. The poster on the screen here is an example of a mock-up of something that could be created using this particular theme to give you an idea of how this theme could be implemented for another purpose. Keep in mind that if any content doesn't fit your theme, you should leave it out. Otherwise, you confuse your message and your audience.
Thanks, Jen. And you're right, I can go on for hours. And so having a theme that helped me know what not to include was really important in that case. Now, when you're looking at a theme, there's scales of theme quality. And what we're sharing on the screen right now are actually the criteria for assessing themes from the Interpretation Canada's Awards of Excellence. So these are awards that Interpretation Canada gives out annually for interpretive programming. So on a very basic level, there should be a theme there, right? So at this first level, you've stated a theme, but it's not a single idea. So we have salmon are food for wildlife, fertilizer for forests, important for First Nations cultures, and also contribute to tourism and blah, 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 blah. So it's been stated, but it's not focused. It's not really going to help you narrow things down, and it doesn't answer so what. If you step it up to the next level, you get a theme that has a focused idea, which is that salmon are awesome. But again, this is very vague and non-specific. You can get a little more specific by saying something like Pacific salmon are an essential part of coastal marine ecosystems. But again, why are they essential and what ecosystems? You have to get more specific because you still haven't quite gotten to something that's compelling enough to really make people feel like, oh yeah, that's the so what. You can also find a theme that's clear, specific, and compelling. But if its relevance to the target audience and the agency aren't clear, it might work for an interpretive program, but it's not going to work when you go to your marketing department or your planning department and say, hey, I really think this interpretive theme can help you. So for an interpretive program, a theme like without Pacific salmon, we wouldn't have forests is fine. if you really want a powerful, compelling theme that's going to help other parts of your site feel that so what, you want to make sure it's connected to your mission. So a clear, specific, and compelling theme that is clearly relevant to your audience and to your agency is sort of like the top level type of theme. So in this example, we have the rotting salmon you smelled on your way here are the lifeblood of Goldstream Provincial Park. And this is speaking directly to an actual problem in the park, which is that folks who are walking through the park that aren't familiar with how a salmon run works can often be kind of turned off by the smell and ask the park operators why those salmon aren't being cleaned up.
So some considerations for putting together a theme and the use of themes. Here's some pointers for you. Think about what is an interpretive theme that you know already versus what everybody else thinks themes are. Things like phrases, colors, or bee stickers. Taglines, as we've mentioned before, are not necessarily themes. Remember the complete sentence that way. And themes are really challenging to write, but really rewarding in the end. So start with the product, or start with the theme, I should say, and develop the product, events, the program, whatever that is around that theme. And also find a good reviewer, somebody, a sounding board, somebody to bounce an idea off. Sometimes the change of one word or one phrase or switching around the order of something makes just a world of difference. And it's important, these themes can be used and are really helpful in improving a visitor experience when people come to visit. Because what we want people to do, what we want to do with visitors, next slide, is to provoke them. Oops, I'm jumping ahead. So what we'd like you to do first is to take your home for a little bit of homework, and maybe right now while you're listening to this, or maybe later in the day, or maybe at home, is to take a pencil or pen out with some paper and start playing around with a theme. What might be a theme that you could develop? Maybe it's a great planning tool sometimes, and putting together this kind of a filling in the blank aspect of things can help get you started in planning that theme for your next project. It's a nice method to use to start to hone things down, and it can be, and keep in mind it's a process, it's not done overnight. It has to do usually several days, sometimes even longer. Set it aside and come back to it. Because we really want, with visitors, we want to have them provoked. We want to provoke them. We want to get them excited about something. We want them to do something about, investigate more information on the web when they go home, talk to their friends about it, want them excited about the visit they've made to your site.
So as Pam said at the beginning of our time together, we really hope that we've provoked you to think about how interpretive themes can improve all aspects of the visitor experience at your site. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us.